The seat slammed forward without warning, snapping my wife's spine against the tray table as the plane dropped, and a red high heel dug straight into her seat like it was intentional. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She turned just enough and said calm and clear, "Please move your foot." The girl behind us laughed and pushed harder. Her mother leaned in immediately, voice sharp, loud, performative. "Don't talk to my daughter like that." A phone came up, recording. Suddenly we weren't passengers anymore. We were the problem. "She's threatening us," the mother said loud enough for half the cabin to hear. The heel tapped again. The seat shook. People started watching. No one spoke. I felt my wife tense, not from pain, but from realizing this wasn't an accident. This was a setup. And as the mother smiled at the camera, I knew one thing for sure. They had no idea who they had just accused or what would happen next. She didn't apologize. She adjusted. The girl slid sideways in her seat, stretching her leg again like the space already belonged to her. Her heel hovered for a beat long enough to be noticed, then pressed back into my wife's seat with casual confidence. That was when she finally spoke, not to us, but to her phone. "Seriously, Tessa, relax," her mother said loudly, stepping halfway into the aisle like she owned it. So that was her name. Tessa smirked, camera angled just right, waiting. Her mother stayed planted in the aisle, blocking it just enough to assert control. "We don't feel safe," her mother announced toward the front of the cabin. "This man keeps turning around." I hadn't moved. She repeated it louder. A few heads turned. Someone shifted. The story began assembling itself in real time. This wasn't rudeness. It was rehearsal. "I don't want trouble," my wife said evenly. "I just need the seat clear." Tessa laughed. Her mother scoffed. "If you can't handle flying, maybe you shouldn't." That was the motive, simple and dangerous. They believed volume was authority, that the first accusation became truth, that confidence mattered more than facts. Tessa leaned back, heel planted again, like a signature. Her mother crossed her arms, already certain how this would end. They weren't trying to win an argument. They were trying to control the narrative. And they had no idea the rules they were leaning on were about to turn against them. Tessa didn't slam the seat anymore. She learned. Now it was rhythm. A soft, deliberate tap with the heel timed perfectly with turbulence, just enough to shake my wife's back without drawing instant attention. Tap, pause, tap again. Each one landed between my wife's shoulder blades like a reminder. My wife adjusted her posture, sitting straighter, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. She had always believed that composure disarmed people like this. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it invited them to see how far they could push. "Turbulence," Tessa said lightly over her shoulder, not turning around. "Planes shake." Her mother laughed, the sound sharp and performative. "People are so sensitive these days." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my hands visible, my voice low. "Please stop putting your foot on her seat." That was all. Tessa turned just enough to smile at me, phone still angled. "Why are you talking to me?" she asked. "My mom's right here." Her mother nodded approvingly. "You're making us uncomfortable." That word again, uncomfortable. Like a card they could play whenever they wanted. A few rows ahead, someone glanced back, then looked away quickly, pretending to read the safety card. The cabin had entered that familiar phase where people sensed conflict, but hadn't yet decided whether it belonged to them. The heel tapped again, harder this time. The first flight attendant noticed before I pressed the call button. She paused in the aisle, eyes flicking from the red heel to my wife's tense shoulders. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, professional neutral. "Yes," Tessa said immediately. "Too fast. He keeps turning around and staring at us." Her mother jumped in without missing a beat. "We feel unsafe." I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't stood. I hadn't even turned fully around. My wife spoke instead, calm, precise. "Her foot has been on my seat multiple times. I've asked her to stop." The attendant looked down. The heel was still there. Not subtle, not accidental. "Ma'am," she said to Tessa, "please keep your feet off other passengers' seats." Tessa sighed like she'd been deeply wronged and slid her foot down, dragging the sole just enough to leave a faint scuff on the leather. "Happy now." The attendant nodded once and moved on. For about 3 minutes there was peace. Then the heel crept back up. Slower this time. Careful. Testing. Not ignorance. Intention. I didn't say anything. I watched. I noted timing pressure pattern. I'd learned long ago that systems cared less about outrage than consistency. When the heel pressed again, my wife didn't turn around. She met my eyes instead. A silent question. "Do we escalate?" I nodded slightly. She pressed the call button. The second attendant arrived, with the lead attendant this time. Before either of them spoke, Tessa lifted her phone higher. "I want it on record," she said loudly, "that this man has been harassing us for the entire flight. Her mother leaned into the aisle, blocking it more clearly now. "We're scared," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "He's aggressive." Aggressive. That was the word they needed. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs, not anger, not panic. Recognition. This wasn't about comfort. It wasn't even about winning an argument. They were laying groundwork. I spoke once evenly. "Her foot has been on my wife's seat repeatedly. We asked her to stop. That's it." The lead attendant didn't respond immediately. She crouched instead, checking the angle of the seat back, the scuff mark, the position of Tessa's leg. She asked my wife to explain again. My wife did. Calm. Chronological? No adjectives? The attendant nodded. "Thank you." That was when a man across the aisle leaned forward. "I've seen it too," he said quietly. "More than once." A woman a row behind added, and I heard what they said. The cabin shifted not dramatically, not loudly, but decisively. Witnesses had entered. Tessa laughed too loud. "This is ridiculous," she said, glancing between faces. "Everyone's being dramatic." Her mother snapped, "Mind your own business." The lead attendant stood. Her tone changed, not harsh, but firm. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. And stop recording other passengers." Tessa opened her mouth to argue, then closed it when she realized this wasn't a debate anymore. As the attendants walked away, I felt it clearly the balance had tipped. Whatever story they'd planned to tell, it no longer belonged to them alone. And judging by the way Tessa's heel stayed down for the first time since takeoff, they knew it too. The calm didn't last. 10 minutes later, while the seatbelt sign was still on, Tessa stood up anyway and stepped into the aisle, forcing the entire row to freeze. A flight attendant called out for her to sit, but Tessa pretended not to hear. As she passed, her hand brushed the top of my wife's seatlight, almost playful, but the vibration traveled straight through the frame and into my wife's back. I caught it. So did the lead attendant. "Ma'am, sit down." Now she said no smile this time. Tessa rolled her eyes like a teenager being scolded and dropped back into her seat. But the mood had changed. The casual tolerance was gone. From that moment on, everything shifted from conversation to procedure. The lead attendant knelt beside our row, lowering her voice. "Sir," she said, "I need to ask you something." I turned slightly, giving her my attention. "Are you traveling in an official capacity today?" It wasn't a question passengers usually heard. I didn't answer immediately. I never rushed answers when the wording mattered. I reached into my jacket slowly, deliberately, making sure there was nothing abrupt about the movement. I took out my identification and angled it so only she could see. Her eyes scanned it once. Then her posture changed. Not surprise, not fear, recognition. "Yes, ma'am," I said quietly. "I am." She didn't ask follow-up questions. She didn't thank me. She simply nodded, once stood, and walked straight toward the front of the aircraft. Behind us, Tessa leaned in close to her mother, whispering fast, the confidence in her voice suddenly brittle. Her phone stayed face down on her tray table, now forgotten. The camera that had felt like a weapon minutes earlier might as well have been dead weight. A moment later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Not the usual friendly update. No jokes, no weather talk. "Cabin crew, please remain at your stations." That was it. The cabin reacted instantly. Spines straightened. Conversations stopped. Even the ambient noise of the plane seemed to pull back. My wife reached for my hand. She didn't ask who the question had been for. She didn't need to. She'd felt the shift too. The wheels touched down smoothly. A few people clapped thin and relieved, but no one stood. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The doors remained closed. The lead attendant returned this time with another crew member and stopped beside Tessa's row. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "you'll need to remain seated." Tessa scoffed. "Why?" The attendant didn't argue. "Because the captain has requested airport authorities to meet the aircraft." That landed hard. Her mother stiffened instantly. "This is harassment," she said loudly, trying to regain control of the room. "My daughter didn't do anything wrong." The attendant finally met her eyes directly. Repeated interference with another passenger's seat and failure to comply with crew instructions are considered safety violations. That word safety changed the temperature in the cabin. A man 2 rows ahead nodded. Someone behind us muttered, "About time." The aircraft door opened, but no one moved. 2 uniformed ground staff stepped inside, calm and unhurried, scanning seat numbers. One of them stopped beside Tessa. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Tessa hesitated just long enough to be noticed. Her mother tried to stand with her. "I'm going with her." "You'll remain seated," the staff member said, polite but immovable. That was the moment Tessa finally looked forward, really looked and met my eyes. The smirk was gone. The performance was gone. She studied my face, searching for something she could use, and finding nothing familiar. The lead attendant turned slightly toward me. "Sir," she said, "we may need you to answer a few questions as well." "Of course," I replied. She lowered her voice. "For the report, could you confirm your position?" I did. Quietly, clearly. No emphasis. No explanation. Her posture shifted again, not deferential, but aligned. The way professionals align when the chain of responsibility becomes unmistakable. Behind us, I heard Tessa whisper, urgent and sharp, "Mom, who is he?" Her mother didn't answer. The staff member collected Tessa's boarding pass and stepped into the aisle. Another staff member approached the mother, asking for hers as well. The room felt suspended, every passenger aware they were watching the end of something, not the beginning. The door stayed open. The cabin stayed silent. Because everyone could feel it now, this wasn't going to end with shouting or viral footage or competing accusations. It was going to end with documentation, witnesses, and consequences. And whatever story Tessa thought she was telling when she lifted that phone, she no longer controlled how it ended. No one stood when the seatbelt sign finally clicked off. The aisle stayed clear. The cabin stayed quiet. The open door felt less like an exit and more like a line drawn across the plane. The lead attendant addressed the cabin in a calm, measured voice. "Please remain seated. We're resolving a safety matter." Tessa shifted in her seat, arms crossed, tight eyes darting. Her mother leaned forward, ready to speak before being asked. "This is outrageous," she said loudly. "We were the ones being harassed." The ground supervisor didn't react. He glanced at the lead attendant, then at the notes in his hand. "Ma'am," he said, "we'll get to you." That word "get" cut the air. Not listen, not debate. Tessa tried to laugh it off. "This is insane," she said, voice too bright. "All this over a seat." The lead attendant didn't argue. She turned slightly toward the cabin. We documented repeated interference with another passenger's seat, refusal to comply with crew instructions, and disruptive conduct. A murmur moved through the rows. Not outrage. Recognition. Her mother started again. "You're taking his side." The supervisor raised a hand. "No one's taking sides," he said. "We're following procedure." He nodded once toward me. "Sir, we'll need a brief confirmation." Every eye shifted. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I stated facts. "I asked for the seat interference to stop," I said. "My wife asked as well." It continued after crew instructions. The supervisor glanced at the lead attendant. She nodded. A man across the aisle spoke up. "I saw it happen multiple times," he said. "It wasn't turbulence," a woman behind him added, "and they kept saying they felt unsafe even when he wasn't doing anything." The supervisor checked his notes again. "Thank you." Tessa's mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She tried again. "You're believing strangers over my daughter." The supervisor didn't look up. "We're corroborating accounts." The lead attendant stepped forward. "We also have timestamps," she said, "and documentation of non-compliance after warnings." Tessa's phone lay face down, now abandoned. The screen that had felt so powerful earlier was just glass. The supervisor turned back to me. "Sir, for the report, please confirm your role." I answered. Quietly. Precisely. There was no reaction from the cabin, no gasps, no whispers, but the crew reacted instantly. Postures aligned. The lead attendant nodded again, sharper this time. The supervisor closed his folder. Understood. That was the moment the story ended. Tessa stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous," she said, panic bleeding through. "You can't do this." The supervisor raised a hand. "Please remain seated." Her mother finally lost the tone she'd been using all flight. "You're making a mistake," she said, voice tight. "We know our rights." The supervisor met her eyes evenly. "Ma'am, this isn't a debate about rights. It's a safety review." He gestured toward the aisle. "Both of you will remain seated while we complete the process." A second staff member stepped in beside Tessa's row, closing off movement without touching anyone. Calm. Absolute. Tessa's confidence collapsed in real time. She looked around, searching for support that wasn't there. Passengers looked back at her, not angry, not smug, just finished. She leaned toward her mother and whispered, "Mom, say something." Her mother said nothing. The supervisor turned to the lead attendant. "We'll proceed off the aircraft." He glanced at me once more. "Sir, thank you for your cooperation." I nodded. That was all. As the crew guided the process forward, the cabin remained silent. No applause, no commentary, just the soft shuffle of procedure, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Tessa sank back into her seat, eyes down the narrative she'd tried to build, dissolving under the weight of witnesses and rules she couldn't talk her way out of. When the line finally moved again, it moved past them. And as my wife and I stepped into the terminal air, I understood something clearly. On that plane, no one had needed to raise their voice. The moment facts replaced performance, the outcome was already decided. No one rushed to stand. The aisle cleared in an orderly, almost careful way, as if the cabin itself wanted to exhale without drawing attention to it. My wife stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary, shoulders finally dropping, her hands resting open on her lap instead of clenched. When she looked at me, there was no triumph in her eyes, just relief. Around us, the mood had changed completely. A man who'd spoken up earlier gave a small nod as he passed. A woman whispered, "I saw everything," like a quiet confession. There were no speeches, no dramatic thanks, just subtle acknowledgments from people who had been holding their breath and were finally allowed to let it go. The tension that had filled the cabin for hours didn't vanish all at once. It thinned layer by layer until it felt manageable again. My wife stood when she was ready, steady on her feet, and the simple act of stepping into the aisle felt like reclaiming space that had been contested far too long. We remained near our seats as the lead attendant returned, holding a printed form and a tablet. She spoke calmly, efficiently, as if she were closing a checklist. She'd been trained for this exact moment. The incident had been logged as a safety interference, she said, with corroborated witness statements and crew documentation. Ground staff confirmed that further review would follow, and that temporary travel restrictions could be applied pending that review. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. The language was procedural final in its own way. She read back the summary once, asked us to confirm accuracy, then handed me a copy. My wife listened closely, nodding when it was done. No one argued, no one interrupted. The rules had arrived not as punishment but as structure, clear boundaries put back where they belonged. The attendant thanked us for our cooperation, not as a favor but as a professional acknowledgement between adults who had respected the process. The matter, as far as this flight was concerned, was closed. We gathered our bags slowly, deliberately letting the last of the cabin empty ahead of us. Tessa and her mother were still seated, watched now contained by quiet authority rather than volume. There was no eye contact, no final exchange. They no longer needed one. As we stepped forward, the lead attendant met my wife's eyes and said simply, "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." My wife smiled back, small but genuine, and thanked her. Outside the aircraft, the terminal felt wider, brighter, almost exaggerated in its normalcy. People moved in every direction, absorbed in their own stories, unaware of the small war that had just ended a few steps behind them. We paused near the windows overlooking the tarmac, the engine's low rumble fading into background noise. My wife leaned into me for a brief second, then straightened steady again. We walked on together, leaving the aircraft and the conflict exactly where it belonged. Sometimes, justice doesn't make noise. It just shows up, does its job, and lets you move on.